Hey, Pat and Doug here with another episode of Wealthy Gym Owners. And today we're going to talk about really trying to address one of the bigger pain points gym owners have, and that's just keeping team members on the same page. So I think Doug has done an extraordinary job with this, and he's got a really practical, straightforward approach to doing it. So today, Doug, we're going to dive right into that. So get us started.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you're facing this problem, I would start with, let's remember that's a good problem, right? If you have team member problems, which you'll always have, that's a good problem because that means you've been able to grow the business enough where you're not the sole provider to all the service, right? You're not doing everything. You may still be doing multiple things, and that's kind of par for the course here, but when we have team member problems, remind gym owners that's a good thing because that means that we've grown enough where we've been able to get some help. So really what I wanted to unpack with this episode was you've got team members, whether that's one or five or however many, doesn't matter. But we have this kind of internal standard of how we want them to operate on a daily and weekly basis. And oftentimes I hear the frustration of either they're not doing it at the quantity that I want it to be done at, or they're not doing it at the quality that I want it done at. And so just kind of unpacking that from an operational perspective, I think it's a good problem to have, like I said, but still a problem to solve.
So good problem, certainly indicative of somebody kind of getting past that initial stage of the journey as a business owner, but still yet a problem, right? So how do we solve it?
So I would first start with, let's make sure we are clear on what we want them to do from a roles and responsibility standpoint. So it does not need to be complicated, like a very simple one sheet listing out what are the things you want this person to do. I think it is certainly step one. If you don't have it on some type of document, all the document does for clarity is I think it just kind of puts it in the middle between the two of you, and you and the team member can both say, yes, this is what I understand I'm supposed to be doing. A common example of that would be if you have a coach that, say, works for you 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week, but maybe only 15 out of those 20 are coaching, and you have these other things that they do during the 5 hours. I find that the frustration with gym owners is really usually not the 15 hours that they're coaching. It's usually the other stuff, like how do I get the most out of those 5 hours? So I think it's step one would be documenting the, like, okay, you're going to coach assigned sessions, but not just leave it broad. Like, I know you've mentioned the line, like other duties as assigned, like that's too broad, right? Or like accountability, that's just a category, right? So what are they doing? Are they doing reach outs? How many reach outs should they be doing? Are they doing cleaning? What does that look like? Just get as detailed as possible from a list perspective. And then just have a sit down with the team member and say, this is what I expect for the job. Are we kind of on the same page here?
So basically knowing what being good at the job looks like, and then giving people the tools, the knowledge they need to be effective in that role, right?
For sure. For sure. And I think the from a frequency standpoint, we talk about hiring and then onboarding a team member, which is just teaching them all they need to know, but that's not really when it stops. I've always had the mindset, right or wrong, that if I can set a team member up for the week, I'm pretty happy, right? For what I would call a frontline employee, like an admin or a coach, this is not their most likely, this is not their career. This is not a multiple six-figure job that they're devoting their whole life to and building their family around. As much as we want that to be, that is a unicorn in this industry. And so we're dealing with oftentimes part-time employees. We're dealing with people who maybe this is a stepping stone to something else. And that's totally fine. I'm not saying that they're going to be bad employees, but to have this expectation that we're going to be able to teach them something once and then they're going to be good is pretty unrealistic. So I've always had the mindset that if I can set them up for the week, and certainly we don't need to go to the level, which I've certainly made that mistake as well, of like micromanaging every minute, every hour, every detail. but you can let them run for the week and then catch up with them again. So that's where we can unpack the weekly cadence, but just starting with that mindset of making sure they're set up for the success of the week and don't have this bigger expectation that you don't have to check in with them for a month or 2 months and they're going to be fine.
Yeah, I've always tied it back to the sports world, that being where my kind of background was. Like, I mean, I wouldn't ask players to do something in a game that we've not practiced, right? Like you don't want to set them up to fail. And then ultimately, you're not just throwing a playbook at somebody and saying, show up on game day. I mean, we're going to practice the plays that we're running. We're going to make sure that we're kind of problem solving or troubleshooting as we go. And a lot of people, I think, hire with the position of kind of advocating responsibility rather than empowering people to grow. So let's kind of get into the check-in, the accountability component of this in the 515. Talk a little bit about how you use that to make sure people are on the same page and probably drive what that week to week looks like in upcoming weeks.
For sure. So I would start it the week before. So if we start our approach on whenever their last day of their week is. So if their last shift is on a Friday, if their last shift is on a Thursday, Saturday, whatever their last shift is, you can create a very simple Google form that they, the 5 comes from, it should take no longer than either 5 minutes or limit it to 5 questions, whichever way you want to think about it. But it should be very quick and punchy. It shouldn't be this novel that they feel like they have to write, because the cadence of it is what's most important, right? So we're doing this every single week. I would just tell my team to bookmark that Google form. That way it's right at the top of their laptop. They just click it every Friday. And it's kind of, if you build out a good 5 questions, you can get all the answers you need, right? We know good questions get good answers. So take the time and refine it over time. Like I was, not I won't say always, but I mean, maybe once a month, once every other month, swapping out a question to what I thought would be a better question. 1, for staleness, so they're not answering the same questions. But 2, if I felt like I was looking for more information or a better answer, I could maybe ask a better question. So it's questions like, if you're checking in on, was there a specific thing that they were supposed to get done that week? You can ask that as a question. Did you, how many, for example, a common thing we have our coaches do is individual text reach outs to clients during the week, right? And so say that they were supposed to do 25 of them. One of your questions could be, how many reach outs did you do that week? So now you don't have to go look for how many they did. They have to self-report. And then as much as you want to hit the kind of maybe tactical or managerial questions, like how many did you do of this, or did this get done? I would also always ask, how was your workload this week? Is there anything I can do to support you for next week? Like some of the more softer questions, just to make sure that if they do have something they want to voice, we're catching that right away. And so that's submitted to you. You get, as you all know, with Google Forms, you get an email. So you get an alert right away, comes to you, you can read it. And some people just start with that, like just that weekly check-in, the employee feeling heard. We know by self-reporting that there's some self-accountability. Like nobody wants to put a bad answer. It's kind of like when clients track food, like they're going to naturally eat better because they know that you're looking at it. And so the idea of the form, I think, is kind of step 1. If you did want to take it to a step 2, it would be, and we did this for our full-timers, it would be on Monday morning. You use that form as a quick huddle, 15 minutes, and that's where the 15 comes from. So it's a quick, I would often do it standing, post, just tack it on as a reoccurring meeting, post one of their sessions. So if their last session on Monday morning is 10 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, there'd be a 15-minute meeting. And so I'd have the answers from their form, but it'd be pretty casual, like just a catch up and a quick one-on-one opportunity. This industry is, one thing I always remind people of is 99% of our time is with clients. And we don't have the luxury of overstaffing to the point where there's all this downtime with coaches just sitting around having what I would maybe, to use a sports analogy, like the time in the locker room or the time watching film or the time doing the off the field stuff. There's just as much, if not more, of that time than there is on practice and game day. And so we don't have the luxury of that. And so just making sure that you have that one-on-one time, I think the cadence is the most important part.
So you use this tool, you turn it into practical incremental improvement. In some ways, it's a little bit like how we use Win the Week in the coaching stuff that we do with clients. Where do you see, if any, stumbling blocks? Like, where do people get stuck? Where are there kind of breakdowns, any of that stuff?
So the first stumbling block is always, do I have to do this every week? And of course, it's your business. It's your choice. You can choose to do it or not. I think that the important part is it's every week for the opportunity for conversation, right? And the opportunity for training and trying to be a little bit more proactive and not as reactive. So oftentimes in management, you might see something and you feel like you just want to like pounce on it right away. Or you're constantly just calling out the bad. You're constantly pulling apart the negative of what a role or a person in that role is doing. And so the opportunity there, I think, is every week. It doesn't need to be like, I think the stumbling block is people feel like it needs to be this big kind of life coaching session every Monday morning. Like, it doesn't need to be that big. It's more like very casual. How was the weekend? Read through the 515, any kind of red flags. Do you need anything this week? Don't forget on Wednesday, we have Bring a Friend Day. Like, just little quick punchy things, fist pump, high five, go on for the week. So that would be the first stumbling block. The second one, I think, and this maybe goes to just team development in general and maybe not specifically the 515, but let's say you have a new coach and in their 515, you ask the question like, did you struggle, or what was one struggle you've had this past week? And they comment like, I had a really hard time modifying Susie's overhead press because of her shoulder injury. Well, what I would probably do, or what I would advise, is when you do have your 515 on Monday, I would walk out to the gym and role play that, right? So the industry is very practical in nature, but we spend a lot of time talking and not actually practically walking through it. So the 515 doesn't have to be like a sit down at a desk formal. It could be in the gym, and you're going to break down how you would modify that overhead press and have them show it to you and put it more to a practical nature. So I think anytime you can move things to a practical nature, role-playing nature, you're going to have a higher retention rate on the employee side.
So, I mean, I think part of the beauty of this is very much like I referenced the Win the Week, because we do that with clients. It's very much a weekly kind of review, preview type of check-in, because that week to week seems to be the most effective kind of rhythm that we found. So, I mean, I don't know that there's a lot of layers of complexity. I think it's just consistent execution and getting better. So before we kind of put a bow on this, is there anything else you want to add? Any other tips, takeaways that you think the people watching or listening would benefit from?
I would say as marching orders, step one would be to build out the form, right? So build out your 4 or 5 questions that you want to ask people and be totally open that those are going to change over time. Step 2 would be to go to the team and say, hey, this is like, even if it's one other team member, 2 other team members, however many you have, go to them and explain why you want to do this, right? And you have to believe in it too. I think that's oftentimes as coaches, when I share something with somebody that I think is a good strategy, like, you have to also believe it's a good strategy, because you don't want to just teach something that you don't actually think is beneficial as well. So I think it's build out the questionnaire, build out the form, then go to the team and explain the why. And then the third step is just simply booking it as a reoccurring thing on your calendar, right? So we talk a lot in our coaching programs about planning. And so this, to me, is part of your weekly plan every week, no matter what. And so just set it as a reoccurring thing to do the 515. And I think you'll kind of see the benefits long-term as you continue to do it.
Awesome. Well, again, man, you're providing simple and powerful solutions to real common problems for gym owners. So thanks for sharing the 515. And that's Doug and Pat with another episode of Wealthy Gym Owners.